Folks, I've got Richard Dolan here, and I've watched Richard. I've read his books. I've seen him on numerous, all forms of media, and it's just really an honor and a pleasure to have him here. But before we get into the interview, first, a word from our trusted sponsor. Folks, are you feeling unsure about your finances these days? Well, you're not alone. That's why Noble Gold Investments is here to help. Just hear it straight from the folks that they've helped. The Noble crew will walk me through everything, no stress. With Noble Gold's help, I can finally sleep easy at night. And now this month, Noble Gold Investments is handing out a free 5-ounce silver American the Beautiful coin if you qualify for an IRA. Invest in gold and silver with Noble Gold Investments. Go to noblegoldinvestments.com now. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. Folks, remember, we've invested with them, and I am really glad we did. But number to call, 877-646-5347. Once again, that's 877-646-5347. We invested with them, and I'm glad we did, especially when we look at the trillions of dollars that the United States is in debt. If it collapses, you and I both will be glad we put some of our money into gold or silver. So Richard, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on the record. And I mean, we could talk probably, the rest of the day. There's so much to talk about, but I want to get your take, first of all, on the whistleblower, David Grusch, congressional hearing, Mace, and to me, why isn't the phone ringing? And Mace asked, Representative Mace asked Grusch, were there biologics recovered from the UFOs? And Mr. Grusch says yes. Were they non-human? Yes. So what are your thoughts when you see that?
Well, first of all, Ellie, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. So I'm just very, very happy to be here. Relating to what you're asking, yeah, it's obviously fascinating. It is the topic of the year in the UFO field, UAP field, whatever we want to call it here. One thing I want to point out to our listeners here is that what David Grusch has said, which is quite striking. Yes, admittedly, there has been retrieval of non-human technology. There has been the acquisition of non-human biologics, as he calls it, alien bodies. Let's just put it right out.
Right.
That's how he's saying. Like that's an incredible thing to say, but I would just like to point out this is something that has been very consistent with what I would say is serious UFO research for about 50 years.
I agree.
So there's been a long-standing community of dedicated researchers, and I always harken back to the true OG of crash retrieval researchers. That is the great Leonard Stringfield. There's Stanton Friedman. I love Stanton, but Leonard Stringfield really broke this open in the 70s and 80s. He was a World War II veteran. He was able to communicate with many, many former members of the U.S. military about precisely what Grusch is talking about here. So the information has been out there. And but you're asking a really on-point question. Grusch has put this out there. He said it to Congress.
Right, exactly.
No one's done this before.
Right.
This is totally new.
Yep.
Even, Stringfield back in the day, he wasn't talking to members of Congress. Nobody was doing this. So Grusch puts this out there. And not only, there's just no major follow-up in the media on this. There's News Nation, and there's maybe the Hill's talking a little bit here and there. But like the big players are dead silent. They are still dead silent. Or even, as I predicted when this all started with him, I just thought David Grusch is going to be the victim of death by 1,000 cuts in the media. And you can kind of start seeing it. There was an attempt really to take him down with some smears about a little over a month ago. And I thought, here it comes. So what I believe we are seeing, this is just my current hypothesis, it could change, but I think that we're witnessing a war, a battle going on within, let's call it the deep state. I call it the national security state, whatever we want to call it. There's a battle going on. Yep. This is not news. This is old news. Been going on for decades. Writer back in the 50s, Donald Kehoe, called them the secrecy group. And there is basically what we might call an insurgency within that did not believe in UFO secrecy. And I think we're seeing another iteration of that here. So I believe that Grusch is part of the insurgency, but also the media is a reflection of this war, because most of our media, I think it's fair to say, is a complete arm of the national security establishment anyway. What freedom is there in that media? And so I think what we're seeing is essentially they're circling the wagons too, and they are working with the Pentagon, which is not happy about these revelations. And I really want to be clear about this. This is not some people will disagree with me, but my take on this is that we are seeing a complex battle take place within the deep state. And that means that there are allies of these people leaking information, putting it out there, and there are enemies of that. And I think mostly the media is still on board with what we can call the secrecy establishment. And so there's just been a whole lot of nothing. There's just been very little to no meaningful follow-up, except here and there some secondary level media of importance, and that's about it. That's what we're getting.
And what amazes me, this is the first time we've ever really communicated. I have exactly the same stand that you. I'm just sitting here going, where is CNN, Fox? I mean, where is anybody talking about this? Dead silence, crickets, nothing happening. Two questions. Because it's just like, here we go. So that's completely silent. Grusch, and I'm a student of body language like I know you are, or assume you are. Grusch is like leaning into the microphone. He's like looking right up at Mace like this. He's earnest, he's sincere, he's on point. I mean, he's like practically jumping out of his skin. He believes in what he's saying.
Good point. Very good point.
Flatline him in mainstream media. I mean, just there's nothing on paper. And video, nothing. However, and this is where I want to go. Jaime Maussan, and I love Jaime. Jaime Maussan gets up with the mummies. It's everywhere. It goes viral. My inbox blows up. It's on all sorts of media everywhere. And in my opinion, it's almost like it's deliberate, because what this does is it obfuscates really what Grusch is talking about, muddies the waters to the point where when this thing comes out that these mummies were a construct, they're hoaxes, in my opinion, just going to blow everything out of the waters. What are your thoughts?
I agree with you, and I think it could very well be an op. We can call it that. It's either, I've been wondering about this too, because the mummies, first of all, we don't even know where these things come from. I have no idea where they are from.
There's no provenance, right?
Exactly, precisely. And there's certainly no peer-reviewed analysis of the whatever biological material they're made out and so on. All of that, agreed. That does not deserve to get the attention. If they were to analyze it, they were to come up with something, great. Let's wait for that. Right now, there's nothing. Meanwhile, you have Grusch, who said a huge, major statement, and it's comparatively nothing. And so why? And I think your suggestion could very well be correct. Like, it's either a bunch of dumb journalists who really don't know any better, and they're just going for the most sensationalist thing out there.
Right.
Get the eyeballs on the page. Okay, I can understand that, but I have to think there are higher level decisions here. There always are. The U.S. media has a long history of being in bed with the intelligence community. Many people know about something called Operation Mockingbird, Cold War, CIA payment of journalists, all of that. We know about that. It's never ended. The names have changed, the relationships are the same. And so I, like you, I have to at least suspect that this is by design, that the attention given to this is to bring in the sensationalist rather than the factual, sober analysis that the subject desperately needs.
So we know in Roswell, they got it right the first time. Army recovers crash disk. And by the way, we're doing 2 films. We were there, and we were out to the debris field, and we actually found, I'll just say it because I know.
You did?
Yeah, we found 2 pieces of the wreckage. It was buried down about 8 inches. We've had it analyzed.
I was going to say, because I've been out there years ago, and there's all kinds of stuff out there.
Yeah, hold on, let me show you this.
Not all alien, this and that,
No, hold on for a second,
But
folks.
if you found something, then get that thing analyzed.
This is not a piece of the wreckage, okay? This is probably a surveying stake or nail.
Yeah.
But we found that was a false hit, as it were. So I got that one. But I'll just come right out and say it. It'll be in Roswell Part 2. But we found 2 pieces of the wreckage, and it's on film. So Frank goes, "Hey guys, I think I got a hit," and we go running over, cameras rolling, and he starts digging with a garden shovel. He's down about 8 inches, and he's been there, but he's got several of them before. It's metal that's folded in on itself. And it's very thin, extremely thin, very brittle. But we had it tested, and the closest thing to it is an aluminum alloy in 1972. So what's that doing out there?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yeah, good.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. But
the Army went on that field, I think 2 months later. This is one of the stories from either Bill Brazel, I think so, who's Mac Brazel's son. He said in September, the Army sent a company, I think it was maybe 100 guys, and they went shoulder to shoulder through that debris field. They picked through it. They also went into the house. They opened up sugar jars and containers, like opening up everything to look for anything that family may have been hiding. So they did a pretty good attempt at cleaning it up, but you never know. Maybe you found something.
Well, we found two pieces very close to each other, slightly outside where people think a debris field is, but it's still the debris field. I'm sure you've seen the video of the White Sands UFO, which comes down like this, hits the ground, goes back up, and then hits the ground again and just shatters into like who knows how many pieces. But to get back on point here, Roswell, the paper comes out, Army recovers crash disk, and 24 hours later, Ramey redacts the whole thing. And this is the question, which ties into to your earlier point, that the old guard ran roughshod over this whole phenomenon, over the story, over what was leaked out. This is it. We found a weather balloon, blah, blah, blah. But the old guard's dead. The old Ramey be 130 something or whatever. So he's out of here, as is everyone else. So I agree with you. There seems to be this push and pull from different factions within the deep state, the shadow government, whatever you want to call it. And they're not elected officials at all, and they're holding all this stuff, really close to the vest. But there seems to be a faction within that, and I think Grusch is part of that is trying to leach this stuff out. I think those who put Commander David Fravor up on Tucker Carlson, and I've talked about this ad nauseum, and this is the question: how do these people get launched, as it were? I mean, who calls up Tucker's producer and go, hey, we're going to have this guy, he doesn't have a book, no DVD, he's a complete unknown, but he's going to be on your show next Friday talking about his engagement with a tic-tac shaped object. That's 2017. That I call the first rung on the ladder of disclosure. Since then, it's Luis Elizondo and up and up and up. So I agree, there seems to be this warring faction, but somebody keeps leaching out things. So all that to say, circling back to Roswell, do you think they'll ever come clean and show us the footage?
Oh, okay. That's the question. It's tough to stump me on a question. This is a tough one because it's been tried and it's failed. 30 years ago, there was a huge investigation into Roswell. Long story short, Congress looked into it. They got totally stonewalled. The congressman who was leading the investigation died of a rapid-acting cancer. That was Stephen Schiff of New Mexico. He talked extensively about how the Air Force basically told him to go take a hike. Nothing got out. And actually what they said was much worse, but I'm not going to use that language.
Okay.
And now here we are. And first of all those Roswell records, according to Schiff's investigation back then, were destroyed. Everything that came out of Roswell Army Airfield from the end of 1946 to the beginning or middle of 48, that whole period, gone. Those records were never supposed to be destroyed. They were. No reason given either. So that's all gone. Now, there's clearly more information that is out there. There's absolutely got to be data. And I have been asking as well, what would it take to release this information, to get UFO honesty? I mean, people talk about disclosure. How about just some honesty? What will it take? And I don't know if the Roswell stuff's ever going to really come out in the detail that we want, but the only thing that's going to move this forward is more of the discussion of what Grusch has opened up. So the absolute discussion of retrievals of UAP or UFOs and the acquisition of bodies. And, we now have a story that just came out a week ago indicating that there are a minimum of 30 additional whistleblowers who have now spoken to the Intelligence Community's Inspector General Office. And we have a sense of what they're talking about, which essentially is acquisition of craft, of bodies, and not just by us, but by the Russians and the Chinese,
Sure.
supposedly, along with attempts to replicate, reproduce the technology and all of that. This is, these are the things that we in this field have been talking about for decades.
For decades.
And apparently, and I say apparently because this is not fully confirmed, but this is the claim now that there's another 30 or more of these whistleblowers following on the heels of Grusch. So I think that's what it will take. It will take that plus media willingness to cover this.
Exactly.
And that's key. And I ask myself, like, how much can come out and the media still stonewalls? Yeah, there could be a million hits on a YouTube video that get into this, but I mean, the sad fact of it seems to me like if ABC and CNN and Fox and CBS, if they're not covering this, it's almost like it didn't happen.
I agree.
That control system still seems to be in place. How long that will last is a good question, but I don't know. I mean, I'm on the edge of I'm watching this, I'm trying to analyze it, but what will it take is really the $64 trillion question.
With a T. And I agree with you. I mean, I watch like you do, and on a daily basis. And you made the statement that those of us in the community were looking at this stuff for decades, and we have. I mean, Lazar came out in the 90s, and I interviewed him way back in the day at the Little Alien, which was really kind of cool. But, he's always stood by his story. I've always believed in his story. I've always believed in it. I'm sort of a Lazar fan. He had really nothing to gain by this, and out he came, and he was threatened and everything else with the guys in the black suits and all this other stuff. But back engineering, and then you got Corso's book talking about back engineering. I mean, they've known, the powers that be know about the stuff. You got Gary Schultz out at Area 51.
Wow, there's a name.
Yeah,
that's right. He took a great photograph.
Great photograph. In the late 80s, click, I mean, there it is. And those of us in the field have been following this. I mean, it's like yawn, we already know what's going on. But I'm going to ask you something. It's my contention that some of these, and the late David Flynn also believed it, that some of these crashes are very, very deliberate.
He's a really good
great guy. Brilliant.
Yeah, I really liked him. Yeah,
he's a great guy.
Anyway, I'm sorry. What was your question?
No. David was real special. I never met him face to face, but I'd call up and we'd talk shop for an hour. That type of thing. Great guy,
Gotcha.
Great soul. Yeah. Where was I? So, bodies are retrieved. I remember inching up to the line with David. And I call him up once and I go, I got a real problem with this. Maybe you can help me. And Whitley Strieber's book was the one that tipped me over the edge, sent me over the edge on it. Because Strieber is on the craft, and he opens up this drawer, and he sees the grays in there, in the drawer. Other people have seen Preston Dennett's book, where Dolly says the grays can be stacked just like chairs. So what if they're avatars? And in other words, what if they're constructs and this is, kind of out there, but what if they're constructs for disembodied spirits to inhabit so they can manipulate in this dimension? What are your thoughts?
All right, so off the record, well, I'm not off the record, I'm being recorded, but I've had conversations with individuals about this exact theme. It's come up many, many times. Thing is, I can't really know if that's the case. What I can say very confidently is that those grays, and I'm very confident they do exist. There's been way too many reports.
Yeah.
They cannot possibly be natural biological organisms. There's a very simple proof of that. You just look at the size of their head and imagine a gray female giving birth to that. It's not possible. Those heads are themselves almost larger in many iterations than the whole rest of the body. Can't fit that through a birth canal, cannot have been born. They had to have been grown. And there's a lot of other reasons. No sex organs, hardly ever. There are some occasional claims that people thought they saw different sexes and genders in them. But I mean, by and large, when you're talking about the Greys, they seem to be sexless. There's no sexual organs, and those heads are just too big. They have to be artificial. A lot of other reasons, we can skip that. So I think that they're constructed avatars. In some way, absolutely yes. For soul transport, look, this is a pretty long-standing theme. You go back into the research of even somebody like Linda Moulton Howe. She talks about this over 20 plus years ago in her very fine 2-volume glimpses of other realities, where there's a whole section where you have abductees talking about the aliens, referring to the bodies as containers. Bob Lazar, I believe, in one of his, when he was going through the briefing before he went into S4, said the same thing. They spoke of bodies as containers. Now, if that's the case, if we want to go with that, you can ask containers for what? Well, if there's a technology, you think about this. We because of our Judeo-Christian heritage, we think of spirituality as positive, as good, as ethical, as moral. But what if there's a species that has spiritual technology, and they don't really have the ethics that we might think that we have, or at least that we try to? What if they're just very pragmatic about it? And what if they, with whatever advanced post-quantum whatever they've got there, they can figure this out, post-AI singularity, who knows what their technology is. If they have mastered the art of soul transfer.
There you go.
I mean, I don't know if this is true, but I personally believe in a soul. I think that it's real. I think that if you have a very advanced group that knows what they're doing, can they do this? Can they create being? And not just ones that look like aliens. Hey, I've got folks talking to me saying they look human. Is that the case? I mean, this can take you down a really crazy rabbit hole.
Yeah,
And
no kidding.
I mean, the only thing I would just say, and I want to hear you on this, is I feel very strongly like I try to stay grounded in what I can factually demonstrate and prove. I'm very happy to speculate. I do it all the time. But I try to just make sure my speculation is separated from what I know factually to be true. But what you're asking is absolutely fascinating to me. And I think there's a lot of other people who are interested in this idea.
And folks, I'm going to drop it right there. You'll have to come back tomorrow for part 2. But because I like to keep the shows, sort of short and pithy, and I think that we've done both of that. But Richard, thanks for coming on. I'm going to leave the cameras on. I'll sign off, and then we'll just pick it right up again, and you'll see part 2 tomorrow. So folks, remember, UFOs are real, burgeoning, and not going away. Thanks for watching.